Thank you. The next question is, what do you think about prison overcrowding and what should society do about it? Again, what do you think about prison overcrowding and what should society do about it? Ms. Moore?
It is a real issue. We don't deal with that on our bench because we hear appeals. By the time the case gets to us, the trial has already taken place in the trial court, and the party that is unhappy with the result appeals it to us, and we review the transcripts and determine whether or not, as a matter of law, the trial court made the right decision. And so those of us, actually we all sat on a trial court before coming to the Court of Appeals, and we had to deal with jail overcrowding. I can just speak for myself in saying that I attempted to utilize every measure that I could to augment having to send people to jail, whether it was community service, whether it was probation, now known as post-release control, every program for chemical dependency, everything, every resource at my disposal I used. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carr.
Yes, it is a concern to every community. As Judge Moore indicated, we do not deal with that on our bench, but having been a former trial judge as well as a county prosecutor, I've had a lot of experience in that area. As a matter of fact, at the county prosecutor's office, I represented the county in regard to a jail overcrowding case that a suit was filed by an inmate in federal court. So I became very familiar with alternative sentencing and different community programs and followed up on those in municipal court, because it's very, very important for all of us that the people that belong in jail and in prison stay there. In other words, the violent offenders need to be the ones that are in prison. So we have to have alternative community programs and alternative sentencing available so that we can make sure that those jail cell beds are available to the most violent in our community.
Thank you. Ms. Whitmore?
I certainly agree with my colleagues' comments, and I won't repeat them. In thinking about what we can do about it, we can focus on education and skills. Young people who don't have education and skills get into trouble. We can focus on community programs that strengthen the family and support the family. These are programs that the court complements with its own treatment programs. I think that as a former trial judge, when selecting the appropriate sentence, we were in a very difficult position. It's not easy to decide, based upon a limited presentation at sentencing, who is a dangerous person and who is not. And I think all of us have had the experience of giving someone an opportunity in the community to have it come back and haunt us. So it's something we think about every day when we're trial judges, and we do the best that we can to make that judgment as to where to put the individual. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to another question. Do you support the recent Supreme Court decision to strike down legislation requiring disclosure of campaign contributions? And how will this decision impact democracy as we know it in the United States? The question again is, do you support the recent Supreme Court decision to strike down legislation requiring disclosure of campaign contributions? And how will this decision impact democracy as we know it in the United States? Ms. Carr?
Wow, that's a tough question to answer in 1 minute. We're in a state of flux in regard to how our elections are handled, and especially in regard to the judiciary. And I would think, I would say, first of all, each of us as judges obviously are take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and we have to follow the law. But in regard to, in regard to the elections, it's a very difficult. I believe in full disclosure. There's no doubt about that. I believe in full disclosure of everything, but it's not an easy issue in regard to how you're going to handle those situations. So I would just, I guess, just leave it at that.
Thank you, Ms. Whitmore.
As judges, we are not allowed to give a personal opinion or comment upon another case, especially a Supreme Court case. But we are expected to know and understand and apply that law, whatever our opinion is. I agree that disclosure is necessary, and in our state system, we do have disclosure responsibilities. Will it impact on democracy? That depends upon whether the citizens make use of the information that is disclosed. Even if there is not disclosure, there are ways that citizens can go and find information about the candidates, and so this particular issue is not a controlling issue. The citizens can get the information and have the responsibility to get it from public records whenever possible.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Moore.
We don't have the luxury as elected judges of deciding whether or not we agree with a decision that comes down from the United States Supreme Court. We are absolutely bound by it. And that's something that I think is important for the public to understand. That is precedent, and that is the law of the land until such time as a change is made by the United States Supreme Court. But I think that the issue points to a broader question, and that is whether or not the citizens of this country, and in particular this state, are served by having judges elected and the impact that money has upon judges. My concern is that the public would like to see judges who are not impacted by, are not impressed by who is writing checks, but just the facts that come before the judge and the law.
Thank you. If there's any questions from the audience you'd like to ask orally, please go to the center aisle with the microphone there. Otherwise, we'll continue with a couple more written questions. The next question is, how can we stop the fear of lawsuits from keeping people from making decisions that are best for the people? For example, because of the fear of liability, no golf course in Wayne County has water to drink on the course. Okay, let's repeat that question. How can we stop the fear of lawsuits from keeping people from making decisions that are best for people? For example, because of the fear of liability, no golf course in Wayne County has water to drink on the course. Ms. Whitmore.
Lawsuits, some of them have merit and many of them do not. What are we going to do about it? Everything that you do, there's somebody willing to criticize and try and go to court about it. I grew up overseas in a system where the losing party had to pay the attorney fees for the other party. In my thinking, that sort of a system might give people pause and might give some attorneys pause and make people think about whether this is an issue that needs court in which to be resolved, or which could be resolved through arbitration or some other mechanism that is less costly and less time consuming.
Thank you. Ms. Moore?
I agree with Judge Whitmore that we have become a litigious society, but I don't know that there really is a way of getting around it. It's a problem that not only exists and has an impact on golf courses, but on physicians and dentists and healthcare professionals as well, who we find practicing defensive medicine because of the fear of being sued. But I think as a community, we can't live our lives in fear. You do the very best you can, you do what's right, and if there are lawsuits involved, you defend to the extent that you can.
Okay, Ms. Carr? I think lawsuits, I always have advised people that I represent or friends that come to me, I'd say, listen, don't get involved in a lawsuit unless it's absolutely necessary. because it's just really a no-win situation. It's a very stressful situation. But I would think it's just a problem with our society in general. I don't know that we as judges can solve the problem. I think it's a problem that we have to look into our community with just, I guess, to our values and what we think is important in life and what we want to accomplish. And I think that's something that we have to deal with just based sometimes looking at our own hearts and our own character. In regard to changes, really, I think it's a legislative issue in regard to some tort reform, whatever you might be in favor of. That's something you're going to have to take up with your legislators. We really can't do it as judges. But I think education's important. I think all those factors come into play. And keep in mind that judges do not legislate from the bench. We just follow the law.